I spent 6 years turning my parents' dying food business into a $12 million national brand. Sleepless nights, skipped holidays, second mortgage, the works. The night I sealed the biggest deal in our history, my mom leaned in and whispered, "Nathan will make a better CEO." Nathan, my brother, who'd spent the last year backpacking through Europe. That's when I realized they didn't see me as the leader, just the placeholder. So I made a choice they never saw coming. And when the investors said, "We didn't invest in your family, we invested in you," everything changed. Cheers to our amazing new chapter, Robert Fine Foods. The most exclusive restaurant in Boston, Ellsworth, had a private dining area where the crystal glasses clinked. Lead Meridian capital investor Edward Graham lifted his glass with real passion, and I grinned. I had finally obtained a $12 million investment to expand my family's specialized food company nationwide after months of talks. The investors were beaming, the champagne was flowing, and my parents looked happier than I had seen them in a long time. Elena Quinn is my name. I gave up a bright future in finance 8 years ago in order to preserve my parents' faltering gourmet store. Everyone said I was insane for quitting my 6-figure job to work for a family firm that was on the verge of going bankrupt. However, where others saw only danger, I saw opportunity. My former business school professor, Dr. Evelyn Blake, who had introduced me to the investors, remarked, "I remember when your parents' shop was just that little storefront in Cambridge. Now take a look at those manufacturing agreements, national distribution, and an online subscription business. Amazing metamorphosis, Elena." The investors' grateful nods filled me with pride. It had not been an easy road. I had established key alliances, relaunched our product line, reorganized operations, and created an e-commerce infrastructure from the ground up. From a well-liked neighborhood store, Robert Fine Foods has developed into a rising national brand, distributing our handcrafted sauces and specialty jams to 48 states. My father raised his glass and remarked, "Without Elena's vision, none of this would have happened." Henry and I had no idea this business would grow to its current size when we founded it 25 years ago. My mother grinned and nodded, but her face briefly lit up. A hesitancy that I was all too familiar with. I felt my mother's fingers slide into mine beneath the table as the investors talked about the expansion plans I had painstakingly created. She whispered, "Elena, dear," leaning near enough to cover me with her perfume. "This is all very exciting, but keep in mind that Nathan will be a better CEO for the family business when he returns from his program next month. Although you've laid a great foundation, he is properly educated for this level of employment." Nathan, my brother, the child with the golden hue, after earning his MBA, he had been touring Europe for the past year, hardly checking in on the family business that I had been rebuilding with his blood, sweat, and tears. As I gripped my mother's hand back, I maintained my grin, but I could feel ice starting to form in my stomach. After 8 years of 18-hour workdays, missed holidays, and a delayed personal life, she still viewed me as the temporary guardian of Nathan's birthright. "Is everything all right?" Observing our conversation, Graham inquired. "Perfect, of course," I answered. I raised my glass higher in response. However, things were already moving behind my smile. The arrival of Monday morning was eagerly anticipated. When my father called with the news that altered everything 8 years ago, I was Morgan Stanley's rising star. The family business was struggling. They had gone overboard by opening a second site, and their upscale cuisine items had been severely impacted by the recession. 3 months remained until they would have to permanently close. I can vividly recall how my coworkers reacted to my resignation. "You're selling fancy jam after quitting finance?" my employer had asked, astonished. Even Nathan, who was completing his undergraduate studies at the time, had questioned my choice. He had said, "Maddie, it's a sinking ship. Give them something else to do, and let it go." However, I was unable to let it go. Robert Fine Foods was more than just a store. It represented the heritage of my parents. I had watched them create recipes, procure products from small family farms, and cultivate a personal connection with each client as a child. I wasn't merely preserving a company when I left my finance job. I was protecting a dream for my family. It was a terrible first 2 years. During the day, I worked at the front desk, and at night, I spent my time looking at spreadsheets. I updated our financial processes, renegotiated supplier contracts, and sold our second facility. In order to finance our initial e-commerce platform, I took out a second mortgage on my apartment. After 6 months of not being able to pay my rent and mortgage, I slept on a cot in the stockroom. After graduating, Nathan accepted an entry-level job at a consulting company, although he was too busy advancing his own profession to assist with the family business. He occasionally provided counsel from the sidelines. My parents, who were always quick to point out how he was obtaining essential expertise that will someday help Robert find foods, never appeared to mind his absence. In the meantime, I was changing the company. A food blogger saw our homemade preserves and shared a post that went viral. I used that publicity to launch a subscription box service, which currently has 35,000 members each month. Our sales increased by 360% last year as a result of the agreements I was able to establish with 3 large gourmet grocery chains. My parents' opinions of my contributions remained oddly conflicted throughout it all. They were undoubtedly appreciative, but there was always a hint of transience in their admiration. Nathan, the only son and firstborn, would eventually assume control. Unspoken family belief that my achievement seemed to be unaffected by it. Elena. I was brought back to the present by Graham's voice. The investors were staring at me with anticipation. I composed myself and said, "I apologize." "Me, could you say that again?" I pulled myself back to the present and inquired. "I wanted to know how you envision the leadership structure of the company developing in the future," Graham remarked. "Your operational plan is great, but I want to confirm that we have the same management philosophy." My mother stiffened next to me as the question lingered. I had been dreading, and looking forward to, this moment for years. In order to maintain the genuine family narrative that our customers identify with, I replied cautiously, conscious of my mother's gaze. The leadership structure will remain as it is currently. I'll continue as CEO with my parents serving as brand ambassadors and advisors. Nodding, Graham made a note in his notebook. "How is your brother doing?" he inquired. "He's completing an MBA program," Margaret said. My mother interrupted me before I could respond. "Nathan recently graduated from Wharton with an executive MBA. Next month, he will join the leadership team and contribute insightful viewpoints from his consulting background." Despite the familiar sting, I maintained a neutral demeanor. My mother talked as though Nathan had been a key part of our development the entire time, even though he had only spent 3 weekends at the shop in the previous 8 years. Graham was obviously aware of the tension as his eyes moved between my mother and me. "I understand. What part will he play?" "That hasn't been decided yet," I blurted out. "Our primary goal is to close this investment round." However, my mom wasn't done yet. She said with pride, "Nathan has always had the strongest business sense in the family. Nathan has a thorough understanding of the financial side that will be essential for this expansion, but Elena has done a fantastic job with the creative aspects." I almost choked while drinking. Prior to joining the family firm, I worked as a financial analyst. Nathan had no idea about the $12 million investment I had just secured after restructuring our entire business, but for some reason my mother thought he was the business guru. I saw Graham look at another important investor, Clara Thomas. A subtle recalculation that I was all too familiar with from my years in finance caused something to change in the mood. They were reevaluating the agreement. "Mrs. Our investment is largely based on Elena's track record and vision," Graham stated cautiously, referring to Robert. "Any major changes in leadership would need to be discussed before the agreement is finalized." My mother was shocked, as though the idea that the investors might be supporting me in addition to the family name had never occurred to her. Uncomfortably, my father cleared his throat. He answered hastily, of course. "Here, we're all in agreement. We're just proud parents, thrilled to see both of our kids participate in what Elena has created. Nothing is fixed. The damage was done, but the topic of conversation changed to something safer. As dinner came to an end, I saw Graham talking quietly to his crew, their faces solemn. He shook hands more firmly than usual when we said our goodbyes. "We ought to speak," he whispered. "Monday morning. Only you." I nodded, fully comprehending. My mother's meaning, and the consequences for their $8 million, had not escaped the investors' notice. Apparently unaware of what had just transpired, my parents talked eagerly about Nathan's return as we drove back in the town vehicle. I had a plan in mind as I gazed out the window at the city lights passing by. It was going to be an intriguing Monday. Really fascinating, in fact. That night, I hardly slept at all. Sick. I was sitting at my desk at the deserted Robert Fine Foods headquarters on Saturday, surrounded by 8 years' worth of documentation, market assessments, and spreadsheets. The cleaning crew had become used to my unusual hours over the years, but they still seemed shocked to see me there on a weekend. "Is everything well, Miss Robert?" Our head of maintenance, Jorge, who has been with us since I took over, was questioned. I answered without raising my eyes from my laptop. "Just getting ready for a big meeting." After yesterday night's elegant supper, another one. You put in too much work?" Despite myself, I grinned. "Thank you, Jorge, for your thoughtfulness. However, this one is crucial. Possibly the most significant meeting I've ever attended." After he departed, I called, something I had been thinking about for months but had put off out of devotion to my family. "It's 6:30 on a Saturday, Elena," Dr. Evelyn Blake's sleepy voice said. Even though my mentor and old professor had always been a trailblazer, this was going above and above. Without introducing myself, I said, "I need your advice. And perhaps your assistance." After 45 minutes, Dr. Evelyn Blake entered the room bearing 2 coffees and a resolute look. She explained the situation, then took a seat back and looked closely at me. "You've been waiting for this for years," she said. "Elena, what do you truly want?" As I thought about my response, the question lingered in the air. What was it that I desired? Appreciation from my parents? The CEO role that I had previously held? Or something else? At last I responded, "I want what I've earned. I also want to quit acting like my family appreciates what I have to offer." Dr. Evelyn Blake gave a nod. "Let's make some calls after that." By lunchtime, I had gotten in touch with Graham and set up an urgent Sunday morning meeting with the investment team. Additionally, I had summoned my devoted staff members, Isla from product development, Lucas from operations, and Zoe from marketing, to attend an urgent strategic meeting. These individuals had been with me from the start, who, with me, had founded this business while Nathan was away discovering himself prior to earning his MBA. My parents wanted to talk about Nathan's exciting business plans, so they contacted me twice. The calls were sent to voicemail by me. Neither Nathan nor my parents were the focus of this weekend. With or without Robert Fine Foods, it was about protecting my future. With a knot in my gut, Sunday morning finally arrived. Working on financial predictions till 3 in the morning, I had hardly slept. At precisely 9 o'clock, Graham and his group arrived, their faces displaying a mixture of wonder and worry. As they sat down in our conference room, Graham said, "I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've learned to trust my instincts. I'm worried about something that transpired at that supper." "You have good reason to be worried," I remarked, passing folders to each of them across the table. "The organizational chart of Robert Fine Foods, as of right now, is on page 1. If my parents get their way after the investment closes, I think it will look like page 2. Nathan was listed as CEO in the second chart, and I was moved to the ambiguous position of creative director, which had no executive control or actual authority." Graham scowled. "We didn't talk about this during our negotiations." "No," I concurred. "It wasn't. However, ever since I joined the company, that has been the unwritten plan in my family. Nathan is the company's anticipated heir, regardless of my success." "What's on page 3 then?" Clara Thomas asked as she flipped through her binder. I inhaled deeply. My counterproposal is that. As the investors looked over the document, the room fell silent. It described a new organizational structure for the business that excluded neither my parents nor the Robert name. At last, Graham said the words, "This is as expected." You're suggesting that we transfer our investment to a new organization under your direction. Yes, I replied, steadily looking him in the eye. Let me demonstrate why that is financially advantageous for all parties. I clicked through a PowerPoint I had made overnight to illustrate that the market validation already existed. The Robert name doesn't have a strong connection with our clientele. They relate to the caliber of our products and our brand narrative, both of which I developed. As I explained how our sales had increased, the investors listened carefully. I presented them with consumer surveys that demonstrated the qualities most closely linked to our brand. Innovation, sustainability, and community connection were all projects I had led, rather than holdovers from my parents' first company. How about the linkages in manufacturing? Thomas inquired. You would be beginning from scratch, wouldn't you? I gave a head shake. Contract renewal provisions for our 3 primary manufacturing partners are scheduled for the upcoming quarter. For years, I have personally maintained such relationships. They are aware of the true owner of this company. As the conference went on, I presented a comprehensive business plan for a new company that would capitalize on all of the things I had established at Robert Fine Foods, but without the family issues. Graham said, this is amazing work for one weekend. But you've probably been considering this for a lot longer. I gave a nod. For the past 3 years or so, it has served as my backup plan. I knew this day may arrive, since I've seen how my parents regard Nathan differently than they do me. Following 2 hours of deliberation, Graham reclined in his seat. Elena, we didn't simply invest in the business, we also invested in you. Indeed, the Robert brand is valuable, but you are the visionary who made it what it is today. He and his colleagues looked at each other. I'm inclined to reroute our investment as you've suggested, with some modifications to protect all parties, but we must perform appropriate due diligence on this new approach. I felt a wave of relief. I'm grateful. If it came to it, I was willing to leave with nothing. Nobody would be interested in that, Graham said. Least of all ours. However, I have a requirement. He hesitated. Before we make any decisions, you and your parents need to have an open discussion, give them an opportunity to understand what they stand to lose. In order to save myself the unavoidable suffering of that encounter, I wanted to decline. I knew he was correct, though. Tonight, I will talk to them. I met with my core team, the individuals who had worked with me to establish the business after the investors had departed. I had previously kept my contingency plan a secret, out of concern that they would perceive it as betraying the family enterprise. After I recounted the scenario, Zoe remarked, I always wondered if you had an exit strategy. It was inevitable given the way your parents speak about Nathan. Lucas gave a nod. Elena, we have been working with you for years, not under the Robert name. Are you implying that you would accompany me? I inquired, taken aback by their prompt assistance. Without a doubt, Isla answered. Actually, we've previously talked about it. We anticipated that this day might arrive, particularly now that Nathan has completed his MBA. The last bit of confidence I needed came from knowing that my crew had already agreed to follow me and had foreseen this situation. They were more than just workers. They were allies. People who valued me, despite my family's lack of appreciation. I felt oddly at ease when I drove to my folks' place that evening. I had been battling for acceptance for years, attempting to establish my value via hard work and accomplishments. But I get it now. Success would never alter their opinion of me. They would always pick Nathan to be their successor, no matter how little he contributed or how well I performed. My phone rang as I pulled into their driveway. Nathan was the one who called from the airport. He said with a smile, Hey Maddie. Just touched down. It seems that the timing of my return couldn't be more perfect. As Mom mentioned a significant investment, I grinned to myself. The timing is ideal, I concurred. I'll see you at work tomorrow. Tomorrow, Monday, when everything would be different. My talk with my folks on Sunday night went just as I had anticipated. My mother was surprised that I would even think of leaving the family. Legacy, my father, who was always the mediator, said, attempting to offer a middle ground. Perhaps you and Nathan could share leadership of the business. I told them that I had been managing this company by myself for 8 years. Given that we're going to grow, why would I need a co-leader at this time? My mother said, Nathan brings fresh perspectives. And he has always had the family's sharpest business sense. On what basis? I asked, trying to speak at a reasonable voice. Did he leave his consultancy position after 2 years? I reinvested my own money into salvaging our company, and I paid for his MBA. My dad appeared to be in anguish. Please understand, Elena, this was always the idea. The eldest child is Nathan. I cut in, I'm 37 years old. Since I took control, the company's revenue has soared by 1,500%. Because of my execution and vision, I was able to acquire an investment of $8 million, but since Nathan was born first, none of it mattered. As he is your son, rather than your daughter. The ensuing stillness told me everything. All the information I required. Tradition and choice were their only protection. At last I stated, it's the investors, not the family name, who are supporting me. You have until tomorrow morning to make a decision. Accept that fact, or risk losing everything I've worked so hard to achieve? A family photo from my early years was hanging over the fireplace in their living room when I left them speechless. Nathan in the spotlight, me off to the side a little. I knew it had always been that way. I simply didn't want to see it. The morning of Monday came clear and bright. Given that my parents usually arrived at 8:30, and that Nathan had texted to say he would join for his first day at 8:45, I had scheduled the investors to meet me at the office at 9 a.m. I got there around 7:30, so I had time to gather my thoughts and get ready for what was about to happen. I was shocked to see that Isla, Lucas, and Zoe were already there, along with perhaps a dozen other important staff members. Why have all of you arrived here so early? I inquired. Zoe grinned. We wanted you to understand that you're not experiencing this alone. We're with you no matter what happens today. The gesture almost made me lose my temper, but I was able to nod appreciatively before withdrawing to my office to go over. I went over my notes one last time. My parents entered at precisely 8:30, their faces tight but resolute. My mom was dressed in fancy attire, as though she were getting ready for a big presentation. My father was obviously worn out after the fight the previous evening. Nathan, dressed in a pricey suit, and displaying the easy confidence of someone who has never had to struggle for acceptance, walked in at 8:42. He shook hands with staff members he hardly knew and exclaimed his excitement at being able to take the helm of the family business. He was already acting as CEO, and I observed from my glass-walled office as he worked the room without earning the title. My mother smiled proudly, showing him different parts of the operation, as though he were a visiting dignitary, instead of someone who should have spent the last 8 years in the trenches with us. The elevator doors opened at exactly 9 in the morning, and Graham entered with his investment team and 2 individuals I knew as legal department partners from Meridian Capital. Immediately, the mood in the office changed. Workers had a feeling that something important was going to occur. My mom ran over and held out her hand. We're so happy you're here, Graham. Let me introduce you to my son, Nathan, who recently got back from... With grace but firmness, Graham cut her off. We're actually here to talk to Elena, Mrs. Robert. However, I believe it would be advantageous for everyone to be present in the conference room. The time had come for the reckoning. Everyone sat down in the tense conference room, with me at the head of the table, the investment team on one side, and my parents and Nathan on the other. Cold commercial realities was set to clash with years of unsaid familial relations. Graham unfolded a number of paperwork from his briefcase. I want to make a very important clarification before we start, he remarked. Elena's leadership and vision for this business were the reasons Meridian Capital's investment was accepted. Her performance history, team, and growth plan were the main topics of our due diligence. Nathan shifted in his chair uneasily. My mom's smile solidified. Graham went on, we've had to reevaluate our position since Friday evening's conversation. It's now evident that expectations for the company's future leadership may differ somewhat. My dad cleared his throat. Robert Fine Foods has always been our dream of a true family business, with each of our children contributing their special talents. Respectfully, Mr. Robert, Clara Thomas interrupted. Our investment was based on leadership continuity. Clara went on to say Elena has shown exceptional business acumen, growing this company from near bankruptcy to a national contender. Our agreement will be materially altered if that leadership changes significantly. Nathan leaned forward, his voice full of confidence, despite the fact that he had not been involved with the company for the last 8 years. I can guarantee you that I am highly qualified too, because of my executive MBA and consulting experience. To what? Graham posed a direct question. To take the place of the one who saved this business, who made the 1,500% increase in its value, who initially obtained this investment. There was silence in the room. My mom's face had turned white. Stunned, her gaze flicked between Graham and Nathan. Graham shoved a document across the table toward my parents and declared, "We have a proposition. There are actually 2 choices. I advise you to thoroughly go over them." My parents' hands were shaking when they opened the folder. There were 2 legal documents within. The first described the initial investment agreement, but it included clear provisions guaranteeing that I would continue as CEO for at least 5 years, and that Nathan would only be able to serve in a non-executive advising capacity. The second document was a very other matter, a $15 million investment term sheet for a new business that I would start and run, unaffiliated with the Robert name or family ownership. What is this? My father's question was hardly audible above a whisper. Insurance, I calmly answered, just in case you haven't figured out what this company is truly worth. Nathan's face flushed as he studied the contents of the second document and grabbed it. You're threatening to launch a rival company in opposition to your own family. I corrected him, saying, I'm protecting the value I've created. Nathan, value that you were not involved in its construction. When I was making payroll in the stockroom while dozing off on a cot, where were you? When we were unable to pay for delivery, I personally delivered orders? When I was manning the register and overhauling our entire product line? My mom appeared stunned. You can't possibly mean to give up your family's legacy, Elena. The door to the conference room opened before I could reply. Lucas, Isla, and at least 15 other staff members, many of whom had worked for the company for years, joined Zoe as they entered. I apologize for the interruption, Zoe stated in a crisp, assured voice. But we wanted to communicate something. After pausing, she turned to face my parents. We accompany Elena if she departs to launch a new business. Every one of us. Whispers filled the room. My parents looked incredulously at the gathered staff, the lifeblood of the business they believed they owned. You have a choice, I remarked softly. Either acknowledge what I've created and who created it, or watch me take away everything that adds value to this business. The only sound in the conference room for about 10 minutes was the shuffle of papers as Nathan and my parents looked over the materials in front of them. Graham and his group anxiously waited. The staff members who had joined me stood at the room's perimeter, serving as a visible reminder of the company's actual worth. With a heavy groan, my father finally moved the first document ahead. We'll sign this one, he remarked in a dejected tone. Elena remained CEO. My mother nodded in agreement, but her lips were squeezed into a narrow line. Nathan appeared shell-shocked, his well-planned future disintegrating in front of him. A smart decision, Graham remarked, gesturing for his legal team to complete the documentation. It was finished 2 hours later. The investment would go ahead, with clear safeguards for my job. Nathan would work for the company as Vice President of Business Development, a position that would report to me and have distinct responsibilities. My parents would become brand ambassadors and completely withdraw from daily management. 6 months have passed since then. Robert Fine Foods is doing well today. Our new product lines have surpassed sales forecasts by 60%, and we are expanding nationally ahead of schedule. We appear to be a charming example of family business success from the outside. The truth is more nuanced. My relationship with Nathan and my parents is completely professional. We have friendly conversations, but only on business. On holidays, I go to the required family dinners, but I no longer look to them for validation or approval. Not all wounds heal. They simply become a part of your identity. However, I learned something important from the betrayal. My family's opinion of me doesn't define my value. The group that supported me that Monday morning, willing to forego security in the name of loyalty and justice, is my real family. On my business cards, I might use the Robert name. However, what is my true legacy? That is wholly mine. And the thing about betrayal is that it can either make you stronger or weaker. I decided to get up. The greatest form of retaliation was ultimately success, peace, and leaving with my head held high. Not a brawl or a speech. Put boundaries in place if you're in pain. Make an investment in yourself. Let depart with honor. The silent force they never anticipate is healing. Have you experienced something similar, being ignored, undervalued, or deceived by family? Leave a comment with your tale. Together, let's transform suffering into strength. How can one rise above, in your opinion?